Hello, YouTube. I am Vince White. I am an employment attorney, and I am answering publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answers they need from an employment attorney. We have a question here from YouTube user Random1208, and I will read that question into the record, and then we'll answer it. Random1208 said, I am back as a subscriber. I would ask you, why did you ever leave? This content is king. I'm just kidding. I get it. It looks like Starbucks made a business decision that breaking the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act, was cheaper than following it. They also seem to have buried the NLRB in violations, who can then toothlessly threaten to restore laboratory conditions. What's the chance of a federal judge putting Starbucks into receivership for contempt or something similar, or something similarly effective in stopping the company from making a mockery of the law? Also, do you still expect Congress to take legislative action vis-a-vis the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, if it fails to stop Starbucks? All right. So I'm going to answer the two questions you asked, and then I'm going to answer the question I think you're really asking. And because I think you're heated in this, and your real question is, WTF, how can this be happening in 2023? I believe. I could be wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, and I will do better. So your first question, what's the chance of a federal judge putting Starbucks into receivership for contempt? Zero. Just not a thing. That's not a reality. Also, do you still, and your second question is, also, do you still expect Congress to take legislative action vis-a-vis the NLRB if it fails to stop Starbucks? I do not. I do not. I actually thought progressive parties would make further inroads in the last election cycle than they did. And they did not live up to my expectations, largely in part because the DNC has done some dirty things to the progressive candidates, and even DNC candidates that lean a little too progressive, in my opinion. And I'm not being politically, I'm not even sharing my own politics here. I just thought this is what was going to happen, and then it didn't, and maybe this is why, right? But no, I do not expect Congress to take action against the National Labor Relations Board for its failures while the Republicans and Democrats hold as many seats as they do. And without getting political in any way, you might say, Vince, why do you say Republicans and Democrats? Because over the past decade, Republicans and Democrats are very similar in how they treat employees, in my opinion. And I think people that try to draw a line in the past decade between those two parties in terms of how they treat workers, I think it's a bit silly. Like, you can make arguments one way or the other, but at the end of the day, there are other parties out there that do seem to care more about the interest of workers, including progressives, independents like Bernie, and even the Green Party. I think you can make an argument that the Libertarian Party has done better for workers in certain situations than some of, well, certainly better than Republican or DNC candidates, in my opinion. So I think the outside parties, the have-nots of the political world, generally offer more to workers right now than the haves, the have-powers, right? The we wish we had power people have to offer things to workers because they want their votes, whereas the people who currently have power don't feel they have to offer as much. So that's my take without giving my own politics in any way. So I don't think that Congress will be taking action against the NLRB right now. I think the current sitting Congress largely is thrilled by the ineffective nature of the National Labor Relations Board, and that taking action against the NLRB would, well, I think it would endanger some of the donors for campaigns of both parties. But I think your overarching question, again, is how can this be happening? What's going on? We live in the United States. We theoretically have the rule of law. And in 2023, how is Starbucks going hog wild on anti-union activity and union busting? And I will answer that question because that is a really, really good question. I think truly that was what you're asking me. So, first and foremost, let's talk about the media. There's two things going on in the media. And the first note there is that the media is owned by a number of large corporations. It's very consolidated in terms of the mainstream media. And it doesn't tend to print as many stories about other large stream companies that are like on the cool list, right? Which is Starbucks is like a big company in the U.S. and is fairly popular with other companies. It's not like the New York Times is like specifically out to destroy Starbucks, and I know they've had some coverage, but I don't think they're looking to destroy that company. So some of the coverage has been a little scant, in my opinion. And then when you look at less mainstream media, the reporting has been a little over the top. Like, I've heard some coverage that's probably just not true. And I don't want to give specifics here. I don't want to call it specific reporters, but I've definitely heard like things along the lines of like Starbucks going around like threatening people's lives. I think we can safely view that as likely being fake news. Like, I don't think we have a Jimmy Hoffa situation in this Starbucks fight to unionize. I could be wrong. It's not impossible. I mean, it's a lot of money on the line, and Starbucks would not likely continue to exist in the same format than it exists in today. If all of its workers were unionized, it would be a much less profitable company. So like, it could happen. But I don't believe it's currently happening. So we have this weird spectrum. I guess get my hands in the frame here. Where a lot of reporters are just not touching this. And then a lot of the coverage this topic does receive is over the top and a bit fake newsy. So what's really happening on the ground becomes obscured. And people rapidly lose interest in it because they kind of feel like, yeah, that probably didn't happen. Or they're just not aware of it. There's just not a lot of attention being given to this. So without attention being given to this issue, and I think Breaking Points, which is a news source that I've linked here a couple times, I think they did a really good job on this. But just in general, I think there's just a lack of attention to the story, and where there is attention given to the story, it's just not in a professional manner. So a lot of people just get nervous about that news source, right? So no, I do not. Do I expect there to be fines against Starbucks? I do. I absolutely do. And those fines could be sizable, high tens of millions, hundreds of millions, hundreds of millions is entirely possible. Like, I don't think it's impossible. But I also don't think it's going to happen in the next 24 months. Like, there's a lag on the government side of action. So Starbucks is running around doing a lot of things that its union busting attorneys tell it to do. And some of those things are going to be effective. And some of them aren't. And some of those things are going to get the NLRB to come down on them and fine them. But they'll be effective in the meantime, and then they'll pay a fine. But frankly, it's probably cheaper to pay fines in the tens or maybe even hundreds of millions than it is to have all the workers of Starbucks in the United States unionized. Which sounds crazy, but is probably the economics of the situation. The economies of scale of having a union nationwide would be, I mean, it's wild. It's a crazy thing. So, are you right to be upset? Yes. Am I upset? Yes. I think we feel the same way about this. Is anything going to happen? Don't think so. Why not? The U.S. voters are not educated enough to vote for their own best interest as employees. We just haven't been educating people very well over the past half century, and folks tend to vote based on weird social issues on both sides of the aisle. You would think voters would care about, like, how am I going to put food on the table, and am I going to be safe at work? And instead they're voting about, like, social issues that don't impact their day to day. And listen, social issues are important. I'm not making fun of that, but putting food on the table and having a job and being safe in your job might be something to consolidate first as a voting populace, and then move on to social issues, because you can't survive if you can't work. You're not going to have food. You're not going to have shelter. This is a foundational element of human existence. You need resources. And the means by which we gain resources in our system is to work, to make money, and buy resources to survive with. So, yeah, I share Random 1208. I share your angst. And this was not a feel-good video. Sorry. Like and subscribe if this was helpful. It wasn't. It wasn't helpful. You should not like and subscribe. I don't think this was helpful. It was just me being frustrated, I guess.